the reason is because these Gospels were considered to be apocrypha. Apocrypha here means, by the way, hidden from the people. Who hid these Gospels and why? The history, when we study it, becomes very, very interesting. And it's very interesting as well to note that the people who started this inquiry and this line of inquiry, the people who started asking who was the historical Jesus, was the early Protestant movement. It's interesting because some of the most hardcore, fundamentalist, blind and fanatic Christians are born-again Christians that actually have now descended from the Protestant movement. But the original Protestant movement started as a challenge to what they considered to be the idolatry of the Roman Catholic Church. The early Protestants considered that Catholicism had been tainted and corrupted by many different pagan practices. And of course, in that respect, they were absolutely correct. This is not, by the way, a subject, unfortunately, that I'm going to deal with in depth today. I'm giving another talk in Melbourne called The Passion of Jesus Christ, the Son of Mary. And in that talk, I will be detailing the pagan origins of Christianity. I hope I will be able to show any fair-minded person that Christianity is not a monotheistic religion. It is in fact a type of paganism. It's a mixture between monotheism and paganism. And hopefully in that lecture we will see how much of Christianity has in fact originated from pagan practices and pagan beliefs, including the Passion itself. And how much of the theology of Christianity is not monotheistic at all. It's rooted in pagan nature worship. And we will examine that in that talk, but we don't have time to do all of that today. It's just as a side point. As the Protestant movement. So they wanted to discover the historical Jesus. They wanted to strip away all the trimmings and all the additions and all the corruptions that the Roman Catholic Church had attributed to Jesus. Mariolatry, the worshipping of Mary, the worshipping of saints, the adding of sacraments, and so many practices and so many teachings and so many beliefs that in their opinion Jesus had never sanctioned and Jesus had never taught. It was a very noble and correct aim. And that's what they started to do that. And they started to begin to ask, we want to know the historical Jesus. We want to know the Jesus of history. Not the Jesus of mythology, not the Jesus of theology, but the true Jesus. What did he really say and what did he really do? And so to discover that, they started to examine and analyze very closely, perhaps for the first time in hundreds and hundreds of years, they began to analyze the literature that they had available, the Gospels. And then they began to ask this question, the historical Jesus. Who was the real Jesus of history? Not the Jesus of theology, not the Jesus of mythology. But what did he do and what did he really say? And that's when they began this form of criticism, biblical criticism. And to do that, they had to try and discover the history in those texts. They had to try and see which and how much of these texts were truly historical. Now it's very interesting that we still have the writings of many, either directly or quite often indirectly being reported by other writers, of what are known as the Church Fathers, the founding fathers of Christianity, people whose names you're probably not familiar with. People like Origen, Clement, Papias, Irenaeus. These were some of the names of the people who were the early founding fathers, the scholars of early Christianity. And it's very interesting to find that also we find in their writings, what have survived of them, they are quoting from Gospels. But the quotations and the things that they quote, we don't find in the Gospels that we have in front of us today. In fact, theologically, in terms of what they believed about Jesus and what they believed about God, they held a very different position. And their attitude, in fact, to the documentation and the accounts that were in front of them was very much more like the attitude of modern biblical scholars today. They analyzed things. They tried to find out, what did Jesus really say? And they had that same problem then. And they were almost contemporaneous. We're talking only within 100, 150, 200 years after Jesus. Even then they were asking, and they were trying to sort through all the different information available. But what happened? What really happened? What really took place? What is the true historical Jesus? We have clues within the Gospels themselves. And what we really find emerging is two completely different types of Jesus. We have the Jesus of history. The Jesus of history comes across as a man who ate, who breathed, who walked, who lived, who died. Who taught a message that was teaching people how to live. It contained practical instructions, ways to behave, things to do, things not to do. He was a man who himself followed the Judaic law, the Mosaic law. He was circumcised, he observed the Sabbath, he taught people to observe the law. And there are sayings attributed to Jesus along the lines of that whoever abandons even one iota or one dot of the law will be considered least in the kingdom of heaven. He hadn't come to change the law, he had come to fulfill it. He and his disciples, they followed the law. And we know about the existence of an early church that was headed in Jerusalem by the brother of Jesus, James. A church that was based in synagogues. A church where people still followed the Mosaic law. A church where people did not believe that Jesus was God, or